All right, everyone, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Good evening, everyone. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of approving the agenda for tonight's meeting as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? President's remarks, I have none. Move into public comments. Just a reminder for public comments, same as other meetings, except for the fact that the public comments are limited to the topic of the special meeting. And as always, please name and address. Any public comments in the room?
My name is Sherry Clifford, and I live at 103 Teal Circle. I'm also the founder of Ocean Pines ROC Incorporated. As a homeowner of Ocean Pines, I am requesting to have a full review of the election's policies and procedures be approved as being brought forward by Frank Daly. This review is in no way a request to change the election results, but a request to review and develop the required policies and procedures necessary to restore confidence and transparency back into our election process. I have submitted to you my request for additional information on documentation and reports that are used or were used in the 2022 election process, and I have them here if you care to have them after the meeting. And you can use them, maybe in the future. Given the calamity of errors that were experienced in this election, it is essential to review and create the required documentation, policies and procedures necessary to ensure a fully functional and accurate election without doubt. My experience in data management and verification over the years has been in a highly regulated environment known as the Securities and Exchange Commission, where documentation, policies and procedures, and accuracy are not only expected but required. In addition, I was the owner and designer of the first centralized and most accurate options exchange database in the financial industry, where even Bloomberg subscribed to my data because of its accuracy of millions of data records used in the trading of options, U.S. options. Sorry, I get a little nervous. This experience gives me the knowledge to point out a lot of the failures in the last election and the call for a full review and development of new election policies and procedures where a call for accuracy is required to restore trust and confidence. The answer is not to go backwards to all paper ballots, but to move forward with technology and do it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments?
Yeah. Amy Peck, 109 Whitehorse Drive. Thank you, Mr. Daly, for bringing forth the motion to conduct a forensic audit. I think we are all in agreement on some issues. One, election integrity is paramount. Homeowners have the right to expect their vote to be counted and recorded correctly. Two, in order to fix a problem, you must understand the problem and know what went wrong. Three, election 2022 went wrong. Policies and procedures and standardized reporting need to happen. Mistakes need to be understood and corrected. Four, the community demands transparency. The Strategic Planning Committee community-wide survey showed this. It was one of the questions at the candidate forum. Transparency cannot just be a buzzword our board members throw about. It has to be real and it has to be demonstrated. So far, you're not doing a very good job. You haven't had the courtesy to respond to my emails regarding the election. In fact, the president did not even mention the election fiasco until I made a public statement at the September meeting. It was then that we learned about the quote, "It's not secret because the door was open" meeting. We have some members of the board not understanding their role versus the election committee's role. And we have a president issuing press releases without board approval or even notification. The first count was not videotaped, that has been the practice. MO6 was not followed. The recount did not include envelopes or multi-household paper ballot reconciliation. Keep in mind that there are 213 owners of multiple lots for a total of 479 lots. Then we had another press release go out saying some members of the election committee resigned, when all of them did, in part because this board stopped them from doing their job and having access to the staff needed to do it. We have a current member of the board who actually has accused the election committee of cheating on more than one occasion. And then it appears advance notice was given to potential committee members. A new chair was appointed, and in a big rush to fill the committee, the board went by a first come, first served selection basis.
Excuse me, point of order. The comments are meant for the issue at hand, which is the audit. We're not talking about the election committee appointments. We're not talking about anything else. Okay, so please focus your comments on the motion and the topic of this particular meeting. Thank you.
Okay, well, for the election committee, I hope that the past mistakes then would be looked at and how the new committee was appointed would be looked at. Because so far, there is not a passing grade on transparency, and certainly there's not actions that give homeowners confidence going forward. I'm asking for you to do the right thing. Vote for an audit. Let's clear this mess up once and for all so that the community and the board can move forward. To deny an audit makes it look like you have something to hide, that you don't care about transparency, about accuracy. It leaves room for ugly rumors and innuendo of foul play, fixing, and stolen elections. That is not a look that anyone wants. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments? Josh, are there any public comments requested by the people that are attending the meeting online?
I don't have anything, no.
Seeing none, I'll close the floor for public comments. Let's move on to new business. There's a motion for forensic audit. Frank?
Okay. The topic is authorizing the election committee to engage a forensic auditor to audit the 2022 election. The motion to authorize a forensic auditor to audit the 2022 Board of Directors election with a target completion date and report submitted to the board no later than December 1st, 2022. The company hired to do the audit must have specific experience in forensic auditing. The company who sold us the equipment and or software currently used may not be selected as the auditor. In addition to recommended procedures that may need to be addressed, the final report should address any appropriate changes, updates, modifications, and or replacement of systems, equipment, and or software based on their findings. The purpose and effect. The Elections Committee report has indicated that the number of votes in the 2022 Board of Directors election exceeds the number of votes expected from the number of ballots returned via paper ballot and or internet voting. The purpose of this audit is to determine how this happened, what caused this discrepancy, what procedures, if any, need to be revised and or implemented to prevent future occurrences, and the net effect of the discrepancy on each candidate. Background. A homeowner's analysis of the 2022 Board of Directors election indicated that the number of votes tabulated exceed the number of votes based on the ballots returned. This anomaly could be in the 500 to 1,100 vote range. The election has been certified. The board is not involved in the election process. This motion will authorize the Elections Committee to engage a forensic auditor for a complete analysis of the election, should it not be able to explain and reconcile the number of votes tallied compared to the number of ballots received. The resignation of the entire Elections Committee makes this step necessary to determine the root causes of the 2022 issues.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Each of the board members has this discussion printout, and I would ask the Assistant Secretary to incorporate that in the minutes of the meeting. So first, what I call the election facts, and clear up anything, just to clear up everything, okay? Per our governing documents, the 2022 election is settled. The audit is not a recount. The intent of this audit is to reconcile certain differences identified by the election committee that conducted the 2022 election. On August 11th, 2022, the election committee reported the following results that were subsequently validated by the committee and approved at the annual general meeting. Paula Gray, 1,027 votes, Amy Peck, 1,451, Stuart Lachernick, 1,802, Monica Rakowski, 1,603, Josette Wheatley, 1,303, Steve Jacobs, 1,867. On 9/14, an Ocean Pines homeowner posted the following information on the Ocean Pines forum.
Hey, Frank, may I interrupt? If you're just going to read this,
Mhm.
in the interest of time, can you maybe point out the things, at least
Sure.
for me, that are the most important ones so that,
Absolutely.
we certainly can review this, but if you're just going to read through this, I would ask that, maybe focus on where you believe that the most important facts are.
Okay. Absolutely.
I would like it read.
It doesn't matter. Please continue, Frank.
Continue with reading.
No, continue with the topics.
Okay.
Well, it's up to Doug. I mean, sorry, I'm out of order.
We can paraphrase there. So here's the issues. Okay, it should go down. Okay, the first slice at this thing was, if you looked at what was called the ballots, multiplied them by the total number of votes allowable. Okay, the number of votes cast exceeded the number of ballots received. I mean, look, in any election in the United States of America, that's a huge red flag and that's a huge problem that needs addressed. Okay, so subsequent analysis shows that it could have been a lot more, because I think all of us are aware of being in elections that sometimes you vote for one candidate, sometimes you vote for two, sometimes you vote for three. Okay, so the amount above the low fence could have been double that easily. Okay, so that's an issue. So then when you go down, the first attempt at a reconciliation, which, by the way, I will go on record as saying, I think it was a good attempt and I think it was the right thing to do. Okay, the first attempt at the reconciliation showed that you had a vote swing, 27 votes in favor of one candidate to another candidate losing 313 votes, and everybody else was in between. And it makes no rhyme or reason in terms of mathematics for it. So the other thing I'd point out, not in this printed document, typically I've been involved in elections here since 2016. I believe, Doug, you have. The typical difference between the lowest vote getting winner and the highest getting the next person down on the pecking order is typically in a range of 50 votes. I mean, if you look at this thing right here and you're looking at the 2023 election, if you come within 300 votes, you should ask for a recount. Okay, it's not inspiring great confidence in ability. In addition to that, okay, so you have this huge difference, which is unacceptable. And then, you have the election committee leaving, which, by the way, another thing, every election committee I've worked with since 2016 have been well-intended volunteers whose only objective is to give us a fair election, an honest election. This committee was no different. This committee ran into some problems that were big, okay, and yet unexplained. So in their final report, they said the hand counting of the paper ballots and the hand count and the tabulations from the scanner were quite different. Now that brings up another issue, and that is that same scanner, to the absolute best of my knowledge, was used in the 2021 election, was used in the bylaws referendum, and is planned to be used in the declaration of restrictions voting, which we voted on and have delayed to see how the electronic voting went. So this issue could have existed for a long time. I mean, we've had paper ballots in this community for years, if not decades. And I think this is the first time that I can ever recall that somebody's really done what I would call an attempt at a reconciliation. And that reconciliation showed errors that are way out of whack. I mean, just totally inexplicable. So The conclusions that I've come to is basically this. We don't know today, sitting here as a board. Well, first, this is one thing I do have to dig into a little bit more from the information. As pointed out quite correctly by some in the media, the number of votes are not determined by the number of ballots. The number of votes are determined by the number of lots. And you can be a multiple lot owner, and therefore on a ballot, you may not have the same amount of what I call tabulated votes as a single lot owner. So we had in the last election, there were 235 homeowners in Ocean Pines that own a total of 535 lots. For the 2022 election, 213 owners owning 479 lots were eligible to participate. And that's where we run into another major problem. Sitting here today as a board, we don't know if the number of votes tabulated in that election were greater than the maximum number of votes possible. We also don't know how many of these sitting here today ballots went through the paper system or the electronic system that might have been from multiple lot owners where the votes were not tabulated correctly and under-tabulated. And we just don't have a handle on that. So that's one thing that's kind of large. The other thing that's kind of large in the system is actually just pinning down what's the real count. I mean, and I guess the question before us, and how would we answer it if asked, if asked, right? If asked under oath, let's be blunt, if asked under oath, is the scanner that this time around going to give the same numbers that were given on September 30th, or is it going to give a different number? Is the hand count going to give the same number or a different number? Because if we go through that and they're different, the problem doesn't get any less. And that's the reason that I asked for an audit. And this I didn't put down. Look, guys, in 2018, we had a forensic audit of this whole association. And I'll give you the 30-second summary. Money was missing. Everybody in Worcester County, including the sheriff, said the money was stolen from that room over there. Okay? Nobody did jack for 18 months while the forensic auditor was working because everybody was convinced it was stolen over there. The forensic audit nailed down that it wasn't stolen from over there. It was stolen from over there and nailed it down to 2 people. That's the kind of analysis that I think we need on this election. And it's a much smaller population of data, much smaller thing to look at. But the objectives of this are really to determine, do we have a systematic problem, and have we had a systematic problem where the number of votes cast exceed the number of votes expected? Because that would need to be fixed. And it could have existed in the past, multiple times. I sure can't say one way or the other. We got to determine if that scanner is accurate, if it's not accurate, why it's not accurate. I mean, and when you get into electronic equipment scanning, it could be a malfunction, it could be programming, it could be, I found out, and this is it could be that once that ballot is separated from the envelope, if I have a stack of ballots here and I run them through the scanner and I get distracted and I run them through again, I understand there's no safeguard to prevent that from happening. So we could have that problem. We don't know. Okay. We have to find out something. And this is another thing. I think every one of us sitting here have been told that on that envelope that your ballot comes into the election on, there's a barcode, and that gives the number of lots and identification. But I'll tell you what, I've never seen a breakdown of that barcode like I've seen in some presentations where here's the information all on that barcode and here's what it tells us. So I don't know what's on that barcode, but after this election, would like to find out and like to find out how traceable that information really is. I've also been told that on the electronic vote, which was very easy, there's a code there that I put in, and that code doesn't tell us very much. I'd like somebody, and only one person, I believe, sitting here, and that's you, Doug, would be familiar with IT auditing. I'd like an auditor that's familiar with IT auditing and electronic systems to tell us what's in that barcode that's traceable, or what's not there, or more importantly, what could be put there in the future to avoid this kind of problem. That's the kind of information I'm after. And the other thing is to make sure our procedures were followed. And if our procedures weren't followed, why? And how they could be changed to make sure that the system's airtight in the future. And then the final thing is, do we need new equipment? Because whatever we have to do, okay, we have to make sure that at the end of the day, X number of lots equates to X number of ballots, equates to X number of votes. And that all has to tie down to zero differential. And I would be perfectly blunt because of some guidance I was given at home. Don't make this a big deal. And it shouldn't be a big deal. We should just investigate, find out, work with the new committee, tighten down our procedures, get the equipment that we have to get the answers, and move on to make sure it's zero. But look, don't let anybody leaving this room to think if this was a county, a state, or a federal election, we'd have the Maryland State Police and the FBI in here with search warrants.
Other discussion? Monica?
I am 100% for a review of the process. In my opinion, that review should include how many test ballots were scanned. At the last meeting, it was mentioned that test ballots were scanned. Were they deleted? Or were those test ballots included in that initial first counting? Did that create some increase? Do we know that? Why wasn't an election contractor used? Why didn't anyone question that there was not a signed, executed contract? Why did we allow the tabulation software to dictate ballots had to be weighted versus one ballot to every member voting requirements? MS06 6.B states information shall be in a form that supports mailing of ballots, not a ballot, to members who own multiple properties. What action should be taken when members engage with the committee during the count? And that happened during the first count. Why did they try and engage the committee during that? Do we have any process in place to make sure that doesn't happen again? And if it does, what are the repercussions for that? And why wasn't a manual count initiated when the scanner started to fail? When they knew that those things are called for. So, I agree with a review of the process. I'm not sure I want to spend association dollars to do it. But I would like to see us have things in place that address your concerns, my concerns, and we follow our bylaws and resolutions for the process.
Yeah. I guess, Monica, may I respond?
Right.
Yeah. I wrestled with this, and here's what I think it boils down to in my mind. To do this successfully, you need three things. You need the right technique, you need the right tools, and you need to be able to focus on it time-wise. And there are things that the forensic auditor can do, and I just digress. We can do this in some stages to find out that we're not spending a gazillion dollars, okay?
Right.
And I don't think we're going to spend a gazillion dollars. I think this is a very small amount of work for somebody that knows what they're doing. But with the right technique, the right tools, and by focusing on it time-wise, I think we can get the answer. And that's why I have the December 1st timeframe in there, because we really are dealing with we're dealing with one scanner, we're dealing with 2,000 ballots, and we're dealing essentially with 500 homeowners that we might have to, one way or the other, use audit techniques to find out, did they vote one way, did they vote the other, did they not vote? Okay. And that in itself was a weighing factor in my mind, because if you really try to get down to figure out within a range, were too many votes counted or were people undercounted, you may have to ask some questions that I think people would be that I think people would be reluctant to answer from a committee meeting. To be more specific, the association can send out a letter to these homeowners that says, we have an auditor that's going to contact you. The auditor's name is such and such. They're going to ask you 2 questions. Did you vote? Yes or no? And if you voted, did you vote for 1, 2, or 3 candidates? That could nail this thing down to, I mean, theoretically, you could nail this down to 0.
Other comments?
I have one comment. And thanks, Frank, for putting this all together. One thing, and you mentioned before, and I have dealt with before, when you're dealing with forensic audits and somebody who is an expert at forensics in dealing with this type of issue, you know, you want to make sure, as to your point, that somebody who's good and who knows how to deal with audits. And, you know, I've dealt with audits before, and you want to make sure that you have somebody that is certified, that knows what they're doing in these type of things. And they're not cheap, and we know that. And, you know, running an audit, a forensic audit, can range between $300 and $400 an hour to run these audits. And that's a lot of money. And how many hours is the association willing to put forward to run an audit? Now, I'm all about the policies and procedures, and I'm all about tightening those up, and I'm all about trying to figure out what went wrong. And, you know, but I believe that we have an election committee that's in place with a very competent chair in the chairman Piatti, who will be able to take some of these things and move forward. I just can't see us spending, you know, $15,000 to $20,000 on an audit on some of these things that I know that our election committee can do and move forward. And to the point of, you know, putting the policies and procedures into place and tightening those up to see what happened. You know, they can work with the vendor who supplied this equipment. I don't know how old this equipment is that we've used. If it's brand new, you know, they could work with them to see if there's issues that had happened with the machinery that they have. I just think that it's something that we can deal with on a local level, and they can come back to us, to the board, and find whatever the findings were and come up with recommendations. So this whole issue, which we all know was unfortunate, and what are the corrective measures moving forward and what we can do for the next election.
May I respond? A couple things. First, in thinking about that, Rick, there are certainly things in here that the election committee can do, and they should be working with the auditors. However, here's certain things that I don't think they can do effectively. Somebody has to talk with the members of the election committee that resigned and find out what procedures they used, if they were followed, how they were followed, if they were not followed, why they weren't followed. I don't think another committee member talking with a committee member is going to get the same results that the auditor will. Second thing, I'm conscious of the cost, but let's ask the auditors what they can dig out and how much it'll cost in terms of time-wise. Because I'm of the opinion that we know a real good forensic auditor. We just spent $250,000 within some of our tenures on the board, right? To get an excellent forensic audit that was very granular and very precise. But I think dealing with this population, they might come back and, you know, this is my guess, and this is what I want to avoid. My guess versus your guess versus Steve's guess. Have them tell us what it'll take. Because I think it'll take them basically 2 weeks to do this with the techniques and the time that they have. And that gets to the cost itself. They, more than anybody else, I would think, would be able to report to the board through the RFP process. Quite frankly, why are you paying us to do this at $400 an hour when your committee can do this? Here's what we can do that the committee can't do. And that's how they can work with the committee to get it. Because I think there are things in here that only they can get using the tools, the technique, and the time that they can spend on it versus our group of volunteers. So, by the way, I have full faith in Tom Piatti. Look, I recommend, I was the guy that nominated Tom as a board replacement. I have full faith in him. But there are certain things in here that I know I'm asking to be done that it's tough for a committee member to do because they don't have the technique, the time, or the tools, and that the auditor would do much better.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt. Somebody keeps removing me from this meeting. It's the fourth time. Whoever's doing it has to stop. Would an IT person keep an eye on this for me, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. Response?
Yeah, in response, and
Steve.
And Frank, thanks for that. The question I have is, I think, to your point, I think what we should do first is we should let the election committee, who we have in place right now, do a deep dive to figure out what the issues were, and then address at another particular time. If there are issues that they can't resolve, then we can come back and look at this motion and see what it's going to cost to move forward on this. I'm just not ready to spend that kind of money, association dollars, on an audit at this moment. I would like to see our folks in place, the election committee in place, to do the deep dive and then come back and give us a report, then move forward.
Steve?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I think Monica sort of hit several nails on the head, because I wrote in my notes the same sort of notion. We don't know if the scanner was ever cleared after the tests were done. I wasn't even in town when the vote took place, but from what I was told, the scanner jammed on more than one occasion. Nobody knows whether the scanner could reset itself. Nobody knows whether anyone else reset the scanner. And since this whole issue has sort of come out, there's half a dozen or more different theories as to what went wrong. I think, and with all due respect, we're asking the elections committee to take a deep dive, is asking a bunch of volunteers to do something that they may not be prepared for or able to undertake. And I frankly have some concerns about going back to the vendor who sold us the equipment or the software that runs with it. I don't know if it's two vendors or one vendor. For what it's worth, I was told it was purchased 3 or 4 years ago, but I have no way of knowing that. But that aside, because it'd be just as easy for the vendor to turn around and tell virtually anyone that, no, wasn't me, but got to be someplace else. You guys got to go look somewhere. And I'm not saying he's right or he's wrong. I'm just saying we don't know. But lastly, out of all of that, the most important thing is we're looking at, I'm assuming, a series of votes to take place dealing with the DRs and the short-term rentals. We have an election coming up every year. And it just seems to me, if you're going to spend money on something that we haven't budgeted for, getting to the point of doing something as basic as running an election without a lot of fuss and feathers is sort of a good way to spend some money. I mean, we've had, for different reasons, last 2 elections have had problems with process, different issues. I get that. But if you talk to, folks that you see on the street or that you might meet at the yacht club or at the golf course or whatever, they sort of scratching their head, wondering if this is the gang that couldn't shoot straight. So I think there's a value in spending the money. And admittedly, I don't know what the cost would be. If it's astronomical, maybe we should reassess. But we should at least put out an RFP to see who we could get at what sort of rate, just to give people who are going to be participating in the next elections some level of confidence that we can get it right. I mean, I can't think of anything more basic to provide to the members of a homeowners association than something like that. And there's 1,000 theories out there as to what went wrong. They may all be wrong. They may all be right. It may be a combination of them. But you got to have an expert to walk in and say, this is the problem. And if we have questions after that, we'll deal with it. But this is something we should be doing.
Colette?
Yeah, and I think, what I'm hearing on the street is that the members have lost faith in our election process and the integrity of our elections, which leads me to believe that what's going to be most important for us to engage going forward is an independent look at the process, independent body to answer the questions. I think Monica raised some good questions. Frank has certainly listed out some good questions. And I think to restore the membership's faith in our election process, we need to spend the dollars. And I agree with Steve that it is probably a good investment to engage somebody professionally who is completely independent, apolitical, and get this done right and move forward with a process and, rewriting of policies if necessary and procedures based on an independent look that is independent of the association and independent of our politics.
Other comments?
I think what I'm hearing though is we don't have faith in the members that are on the committee now. That they can't be independent and they can't do this kind of a review. Sherry's agreed to put together some processes and procedures and reports. I know Amy made comments in the public comments during the meetings of things that would be helpful in determining this. I just think it's a little premature to say we're going to spend some money. I'm okay with the RFP, but I just am not okay right now saying, let's go spend some money without knowing the estimated cost, what's involved, and those types of things. I just think we need to do a little more due diligence before that happens. Do we need to meet with the election committee and work with them to see what they're willing to do, how they're willing to question? Will the former volunteers be willing to participate? I think those are questions that should be answered and pursued before we agree to spending money.
Colette.
Yeah, I guess, this is not to cast aspersions on the current election committee. But I think if we all look backwards at at least the last 5 elections that I've been on the board for, we've had people of undisputed integrity and expertise whose integrity has been questioned publicly by people sitting on the board, candidates running, over issues that are much more minor and much less consequential than these fundamental, the fundamental integrity of the count that was conducted and reported. So, my feeling is that the independence protects the committee from those kind of barbs. And I would not want to see a new committee be attacked before they even get started. And, Doug, you've seen this happen. The last election committee that we had before this one, the chair was, a person of impeccable integrity. And there were barbs thrown at him by people sitting on this board during that election process. And they were thrown at this committee. I was standing in the room when they were doing counting, and there were people online typing in their snarky attacks at the sitting election committee. So I think the independence protects all of us. And, unfortunately, it's going to cost money to purchase that, but that's part of what you pay for. Is, to get it done right, but get it done in a way that protects all of us.
Stuart.
Yeah, I have a comment. Listen, it's not brain surgery. We have been running elections in this town for 50 years. Just the last 2 have not gone as smoothly as they possibly could. Why don't we go back to what worked? For 50 years, we did not have a disputed election. We didn't have any issues. I think that, let's let Chair Piatti take care of making sure that our election process runs correctly. He has an incredibly competent group of people to volunteer for him. You talk about impeccable credentials. Tell me who's got a more impeccable credential than Tom Piatti. So that's my comment. I don't know that I'm really sold on spending association money to find out where the mistakes went in the past. We've had 2 recounts. They came out, even though the counts have been dissimilar, it's over. It's time to move on. Let's get back to the business of what we do. Thank you.
Other comments?
I just got one more comment. I think what we should do, my final comment on this is we should have the election committee. I submitted a charging document requesting the election committee to do a lot of these things that Frank eloquently put in his the papers here. And I think we should have that step first before we do anything as far as talking about spending association dollars. I would like to get Tom and his crew to be able to come up with these recommendations. And then if there's a point in time where there's a stop, where there has to be some sort of an audit or something that they can't do, then I think we should address it at that time.
Steve?
Yeah, look, I'm looking at it another way. If the last elections committee had not resigned en masse and this motion came up, I think the first question would be, and I think it's a fair question, is what is the expertise that that committee holds to be able to answer the questions that both the initial count and the recount raised in terms of the numbers not making sense. And without casting aspersions either on the former committee or on this committee, I mean, I voted for Tom Piatti as chairman too. I have no problem with him. I think he's fine. And I'm sure the committee will do a good job when they do what is charged for them to do under the appropriate governing documents. But in fairness to them, A, they're a bunch of volunteers, much like us, and B, as far as I can tell, they have no particular expertise in any of this. There might have been an elections judge or a clerk that has gone through counting ballots and all that, but we're beyond that point. And you still have out there in the Ethernet, theory upon theory upon theory as to what went wrong. At this point, I think we could adopt the motion, put out an RFP. And if the money is that objectionable, then you rethink how you want to address it. But to me, it still comes down to the same point. We have elections coming up that, as I understand from what Frank just said, have been delayed in part because of this. And we have another election coming up next summer. And we're going to ask, was it 5 or 6 folks to undertake, as Rick calls it, a deep dive into this when they have no expertise in the field. I mean, I don't think it's a question of not having faith in them or not thinking they can't do the job. It's just, we're talking about almost 2 different things here. And on another issue, which I may disagree with Frank on, he made the point, that this is a solution in need of a problem. I think what we have right here is a problem in need of a solution. And I think that's what we need to face up to. And frankly, I think the residents of the association would expect us to spend money on this. I mean, they may not use all the amenities. They may not join committees. They may only be here part-time, but an awful lot of them vote. And if they don't think their vote's counting very much, where are we?
Frank?
Yeah, I mean, to this, 2 points, actually. Certainly, I don't have all the faith in the world in the new election committee. The motion calls for this election committee to work with forensic auditor. I'm also working on the basis that if the past election committee, which we also had faith in, we adopted electronic voting based on their input to us. Okay, if they could reconcile the difference between the ballots, the lots, and the votes, it would have been done on September 30th. Okay, that requires some very specialized auditing techniques that the committee just simply, I'll tell you, I'm 100% sure no member of the committee has it. Because we're back to where we were 5 years ago. We're trying to find out who stole the money on the other side of the wall. Okay, not that anybody did anything wrong. We're just trying to nail down exactly how many votes should be, how many votes were cast, and what any potential difference is. And that is highly, I don't think it's going to be tremendously expensive, but it's highly sophisticated to answer that question.
Okay, I've refrained from comment until now, so now I'll have the floor. So a couple of points. First of all this information is very helpful. You know, it's opened our eyes to understanding there's an issue here, and we don't know exactly what the root cause is, right? But we have an idea that there are certain factors that have contributed to what could arguably be, we'll call it ineffective results of, the ballot process. I'm not in favor of spending money at this time, and here's why. I believe firmly that the committee can go out and take a look at it. Steve, I'm going to argue with you a little bit with regard to the vendor. You say the vendor's always going to be, oh, it's not my problem. Well, in my world, when I would do that, that's fine, except there's other companies out there that we can do business with. And if you don't want our business anymore, thank you very much. I'll move on and bring somebody else on. That's a motivating factor. If I'm looking the guy in the eye, I'm going to make sure he understands the fact that, you need me more than I need you. All right. So that's a negotiating tactic. And certainly I think that's an easy, low cost, zero cost way. When I say low cost, obviously you're going to have time for people to actually go out and make these inquiries and so on and so forth and open these discussions. So I would offer that's the first place to start. Guys, partner with it. You are now our partners in this process. We've invested in your company. Help us understand what perhaps we did wrong, perhaps needs to be changed, and so on and so forth. Engage in that dialogue. It costs us nothing. It gives the committee some information to build on. Oh, by the way, that information, should we decide that we actually, at the end of the day, do need to have some sort of audit, now you've got some additional background information that the auditor is going to ask for anyway. All right, now we've sort of shortened that timeline of at $400 an hour. Maybe we use 2 or 3 less hours of that auditor's time because we've already collected that information. Going back to the idea that folks don't have the experience, I'll use myself as an example. When I first ran for the board, I said, I have no experience in running a food and beverage operation. You know what? But I'll go find somebody that can. I'm not averse to it. I would fully expect somebody with the integrity and the understanding of Tom Piatti to say, hey, if I don't have that information, I'll go out and get it. I think there was a couple, these two folks here had some ideas. I would expect Tom to reach out to them, share with me that information. There's nothing preventing the committee from walking out to the vendor, to the former committee members, to other members of the association, and gathering information as part of this analysis. Okay, it could get us to the point where we could at some point make a determination whether or not we do need independent help. All right. And I'm very sensitive to spending that kind of money. I'd hate to spend, we'll make up a number, $15,000 to find out that we didn't have the right box checked on the scanner software. All right. I mean, just to me, it's ludicrous to do something like that and automatically assume that the auditor would have all of this information at his or her disposal, that we couldn't do. I'm just not buying that. I would rather go through a fairly extensive deep dive, get some information, and then relook at the issue again and say, guys, what have we learned since we took this course of action? And if we've learned something, we can put it in action. And if we haven't learned something, then perhaps we look at saying, okay, now maybe we need some outside independent help with a level of expertise. And quite frankly, Frank, I was chuckling when you said, the audit firm, what was it? Gross Mendelson was the group that we brought in. My question would be, would they have somebody who is sort of an expert in election process auditing? It'd be interesting to find out. Just was curious, but anyway, I mean, all of these, there's nothing wrong with this. I just think we should take it a step at a time. I'm not going to support it, not because I don't think it's a good idea. I just think that we can get more information by taking this other course of action first, and then that would sort of quantify whether or not the second course of action is appropriate. So that's it. Colette and then Frank.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Doug. But I think even this first step is a full-time job for somebody. And these are volunteers. And I think that's a lot to ask of volunteers to do a deep dive timely, which is what we need. We've got some important votes and elections coming up, referenda coming up. And, I think it's a lot to ask of our volunteer elections committee to put in the time that would be required to do a deep dive timely for us.
Understood. Frank?
So, okay, let's in the spirit of cooperation discuss. So supposing we turn this over to committee, what timeline are we going to put them on?
I would take the same one you were talking about.
Okay. And during that timeline, Okay, so let's just say that they have until December 1st to issue this report. There's nothing to stop us from going to Gross Mendelson right now because we're throwing around numbers like $400 an hour. I think it's 2 weeks. Who really knows what it is? Okay, how about if we do something kind of, I don't want to do anything groundbreaking. How about if we ask Gross Mendelson and bring them in and talk with John, okay, or us, and say, look, we had this problem with this election and this is what we want to find out. How would you go about doing it? What's the cost going to be of that for doing that? And how would you work with the election committee? That way, we're not sitting here on December 1st with no answer, okay? A delayed declaration of restrictions thing, which will then been delayed more than a year, facing another election in 6 short months, which people would start campaigning for in probably 2 months, okay? Using the same scanner, the same processes, and the same electronic voting hardware.
Yeah, Frank, I absolutely support that approach. I think it doesn't cost us anything to go out to gross metals, and quite frankly, it costs us nothing to create an RFP. Even, we don't have to act on it. We can certainly put an RFP out to the, to the industry out on the street and figure out what's going on. We might find out that, there's only 2 or 3 firms in the country that do forensic auditing of election results. I don't know, but nothing hurts it. But I can support that idea of maybe reaching out to gross metals. And quite frankly, if you guys think it's a reasonable idea, I'll certainly do that. I can, and I'll keep
And Tom, and I see
and I'll
Tom is following this thing. Look, pull the committee together. December 1st is the date. This is the information we want. You can get it or you can't. If you can't, we go the Gross Mendelson route.
Yeah, and I would include in this, so, not that we have to have a formal vote, but if you think it's a good idea, I'll include Tom and obviously everybody here on the board. We'll reach out to the contacts at Gross Mendelson and basically, but if like I normally do, I'll draft something for you guys to look at and say, all right, here's what I'm getting ready to send to, to this auditing firm. And we send it out and figure out what we want to do. Everybody okay with that? Colette?
And what I'd like to see happen is a work group be formed we've got questions coming from different sources, community and the board that are relevant, important questions. And I'd like to have a work group put together those questions that we would give to the election committee to answer for us by December 1st.
Well, all right, Stu, I'll get to you in a second. Reasonable, but I mean, I don't see the benefit of an extra layer of bureaucracy on top of something. Why couldn't they go to info@oceanpines.org and the folks that are doing that, we just tell them, hey, anything that comes in with regard to the election, hand it over to the elections committee. I mean, I just don't think we have to have one additional work group and a line of communication that's open for that, just, to field questions. That's just my
Well,
opinion.
I guess the concern is that that all the questions that get sent in get addressed. And, a lot of stuff that could come in through info@oceanpines.org that wouldn't be relevant,
Well,
would be spinning our wheels.
yeah.
So I'd like to have some layer of vetting of the kind of questions that would be worthy to burden our elections committee with.
Okay. Oh, Stuart. No, Stuart's next. Stuart?
Yeah, I think we should just ask Tom Piatti how long he needs before we would reach out. He would be the one to talk to, I think.
Right.
Yeah, as far as, to the point, I just think that, I know there is an email address that's out there. I believe, the prior chair of the election committee had a email address.
Yeah.
That has been, put on silent, I guess you would call it. I think we could reactivate that, and any of those type of questions can go to, elections at, I think it's a Gmail account, electionscommittee@gmail.com. So I think that's one of the things, instead of going through, info@oceanpines.org, it can go straight to, Tom, who will have access to that, email address. So that's one of the things I would suggest.
Good idea too. Frank?
Say, I'm okay with everything, but one thing that I just heard that I'm not okay with. December 1st, as far as I'm concerned, is a drop dead date. We either get these questions answered December 1st by the election committee, or we go to a forensic audit.
I think
I think that's a reasonable time
reasonable.
frame.
I think that's reasonable.
Yep.
Okay, because I don't want to be sitting here in February and March and not having any answers. Looking at now an election delayed 18 months because we don't have the things in place. and not having an answer as to what happened last year.
I agree.
December 1st is the date,
Yeah.
or we go to audit.
I can accept that.
Yep.
Okay, other discussion?
No,
Okay,
question.
last,
More procedural question, okay? Let's memorialize that. You know, Tom's tied in there. I guess we just put Tom on the hook for December 1st. Okay, we get the RFP going. And if we don't get the answers in the report December 1st in a meeting, go to audit.
okay,
How do we memorialize it?
okay. I think the recording of this meeting memorializes it. Okay, last comment, Colette.
I would sooner see it be a friendly amendment to this motion.
I wanted to do it. I mean, I just want to know how, what the right wording is, what everybody agrees to.
Well,
Table this.
to charge the elections committee with doing a deep dive that includes the questions that Frank put forth, questions that Monica put forth, and questions that may be submitted by qualified members through the elections email address. And at the same time, to charge the president of the association to reach out to Gross Mendelson
Mhm.
to gather information about forensic audit.
My recommendation is we table the motion so it doesn't get defeated. Bring it up at a future meeting. And we agree here in public that we'll take the steps that we talked about, reaching out to the elections committee chair, telling them that we have a December 1st deadline, finding out exactly whether or not they can meet that deadline, and based on their response, we can move forward. We can call another special meeting. This will be to bring this motion back on the table for a vote for a forensic audit.
Procedural question, if I may.
Steve?
Um, that probably works. My question is whether or not we could have something drafted and circulated maybe for the next meeting before we go closed. I mean,
I'm not sure I follow you.
that would be Tuesday.
Okay, help me. I'm not sure I follow what you mean.
Well, my concern would be we're giving the elections committee a December 1 deadline.
Mhm.
So the clock is ticking. So the sooner we have an agreed to motion in the form of a friendly amendment or a new motion that captures everybody's thought process, we should get that passed as soon as possible. So my question is procedurally, whether or not we can do that Tuesday before we go close.
Well, in order to provide or request action by a committee, all we need to do is send them information. It doesn't require a board vote or a motion. All right. That's what the charging document is for. All right. We get them to do work for us because remember, these words sounds kind of disparaging, but they work at the pleasure of the board. So we ask them to do something, they're required to do it. And they may say, you know what, we can't do December 1st. That's a potential answer we'll get. That could happen. Okay. So as far as I'm concerned, that's not needed because we've reached out to them already. I will take it upon myself to, based on, assuming you guys agree, to just remind Chair Piatti that this is what we talked about last night. And, if you have any questions, please let us know and we'll reach out to him and make sure we keep that process going.
Again, if I carry it a step further, if I may, that's fine. I understand that notion. My understanding was there were additional considerations that we want to make sure we had in place. That all of the various issues would be included, that we would have a December 1 drop dead date,
Mhm.
that you either we're doing it or maybe we're doing both, RFP plus the other auditing company that you all are familiar with would be contacted prior to that time just to get some initial information as to cost and workability. What I'm hearing, at least what I thought I heard, was there was a need to put that down in some sort of form that we could vote on. And my only question is, if we have a drop dead date of December 1, you need to get something voted on quickly. And that's my question.
Oh, so the idea here would be, and I'll get to you in 1 second. The idea here would be if we table the motion, we get the information back from the elections committee. we can certainly take it upon ourselves to call a special meeting either prior to or on December 1st to address this motion.
Well, and we get an RFP from Gross Mendelson, like,
Yeah,
Sweet.
there's nothing preventing us. I mean, we.
yeah, I know where you're coming from.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
No, I understand what you're saying.
Linda could put out an RFP for office services. Remember, it doesn't matter until it comes to the board for either a policy decision or a financial expense.
Right.
All right. So there's nothing preventing anybody from taking any any course of action
Okay.
at the committee level.
That's
They can
fine.
do what they like.
I think we're okay. Just get the RFP.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too, Doug, that, and I know Tom, and Tom is pretty,
Tom's pretty thorough.
Tom's a thorough and he's a straight shooter. Look, if he determines next week that he can't meet December 1st,
He'll tell us.
then,
Yeah.
then it's, the ball's in their court to tell us, and then we call it a special meeting.
And then we can call a special meeting prior to December 1st and move forward. All right, last comment, Colette.
So I'd like to see it put in a charging document. I think Frank and Monica could do that and circulate it among the board so that we're all on the same page about what the expectation is that we're communicating to the committee.
Well, why don't we just
Yeah.
add it, why don't we just add it to
Put
the
it-
charging document that's already out there? And just put version 2 of the charging document and just say, hey, based on the meeting that we had tonight, here are some additional items that we want to make sure the committee focuses on.
And those will be the items in Frank's document.
Well, right,
Yep.
Frank's and Monica's document. As a matter of fact, and I think Tom, matter of fact, all right, there you go. So Monica, make sure Frank gets, or Tom gets that as well. Okay?
Well, the charging document was written by Rick, right?
Yeah.
You have this, you can just put that in there.
Right. And I want to see what Sherry had also.
If I may pass.
So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and put it all together in the version 2 and I'll send it out to the rest of the board.
All right, I'm going to ask the original submitter of the motion. Would you consider tabling the motion until the next meeting?
Yeah, we will table.
Okay. We have to officially vote on that. So there has been a request to table the motion that was submitted at the beginning of this, or at the beginning of new business of this meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of tabling the motion that was presented in new business at this meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so it's 7 others. So the motion is tabled and we will bring it up as we discussed here in the past few minutes. Seeing no more new business, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.